boots on the ground anywhere, and if not in Ukraine, let's say, to help Ukrainians fight a 4-year-long, nearly unjustified war, an assault on them from Russia, how would this administration justify doing so in Venezuela?
I don't know how it will. Donald Trump has always said he is the president that kept us out of foreign wars and foreign adventures. Well, this certainly is a foreign war and a foreign adventure. There are so many weapons and guns in Venezuela, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be scurrying to get some type of capability, weapons, because they anticipate there's probably going to be a lot of violence in the weeks and months ahead. And if the U.S. is going to run this country, unless they have real Venezuelan puppets who, and they will be seen as such by the Venezuelan people, who are going to run the country on behalf of the United States will need to put some type of military force on the ground there. And that's where there's going to be a risk. There's going to be, the potential for, Venezuelans who are going to take sort of matters into their own hands and try to lash out against U.S. interests, and not just U.S. military forces, but also U.S. business interests, commercial interests. Chevron continues to operate in Venezuela. And so I do think this is a period of time where the traditional concerns about, terrorist attacks really will need to be heightened, because again, there's not just going to be sort of consensual sort of support within Venezuela for this U.S. military operation.
John, given your vast experience there within the CIA as its director, I'm curious how you see this went down. According to the New York Times, a CIA source within the Venezuelan government monitored Maduro's location. It was done prior to his capture, of course, by the U.S. Special Forces, and that the CIA had officers working on the ground beginning in August in a clandestine manner, it's described. Give us a sense of how this went down over the last 5 months. How would it have percolated into what happened in the wee hours this morning?
Well, a very unusual move. Donald Trump had announced months ago that he had authorized a covert action finding for the CIA to operate in Venezuela. He also mentioned...
John, can I ask you, how would anybody within the CIA have reacted to that when they heard that announcement?
Well, I think they would have been aghast that he would have announced it publicly. But the CIA professionals, their job is to salute and to follow duly authorized orders. And a covert action finding is something that is authorized by the President of the United States to conduct these activities, but it's supposed to be in an unacknowledged way, which is not what Donald Trump did. But it's to shape military or political developments overseas, but hide the hand of the U.S. government. So combined then with U.S. intelligence collection capabilities, the CIA, I still think, despite some politicization at the top, is the premier intelligence agency in the world. And they would have been able to carry out operations clandestinely inside of Venezuela, find individuals who had access to Maduro, to the Maduro administration, be able to assess his whereabouts, his movements, and so on, and feed that information into the U.S. military. That is what the CIA traditionally does, is collect those types of secrets and then share them so that there can be policy actions on military actions that are taken afterward. And so, again, I'm not surprised at all that the CIA was able to do this. We've had longstanding, presence and capabilities inside of Latin America, South America, and in Venezuela. And so over the past 5 months, I'm sure the CIA was able to develop the type of insight, the type of information that the military really relied on to carry out what appears to be a near flawless operation.
Last quick question to you, John. Who's likely running Venezuela right now?
Oh, boy, that's a big question. Well, I think according to the Venezuelan constitution, it would be the vice president who would be sworn in. And you have to take everything that was said at that press conference about the support from the Venezuelan people with a grain of salt. I don't know whether or not the vice president, who has been sworn in, is now working with the U.S. to try to, smooth this transition period. But I do think there are a lot of people within the Venezuelan cabinet who are asking themselves that question. And I'm sure that there's going to be some efforts made by, again, the Interior Minister Cabello, Defense Minister Padrino, and others to really try to gain some control and to retain the capability to carry out their activities and operations so that they can protect their interests and the interests of the elements of the Maduro regime that are still in place. You have questions about the critical infrastructure, who's running the electrical system and other things. And so I think there's going to be a period of instability and turmoil in the coming days and weeks. And again, for Trump to say very blatantly, the U.S. is going to be running the show. Well, as Colin Powell famously said, you break it, you bought it. And so now we have some responsibility for what is going to happen in Venezuela in the coming days.
Former CIA Director John Brennan, thank you so much for your